First of all, I just want to say it's a great privilege and honor for me to share the stage here with Deborah and Michael and Professor West. And it's also humbling for me to be in your presence because I know that you have been engaged actively in making a difference in what is happening in our world. And that says a lot because it takes a lot of courage to go out there and be a lone voice when it seems that sometimes it seems that we are part of a collective psychosis. And what has happened is that we take the psychotic to be normal. So deep is our desire for meaning and purpose in our existence and in everything that happens around us, that when governments and heads of state behave like they've lost their mind, we deny the evidence. I would say that Michael Lerner has set the stage for a wonderful conference here, and I totally support the efforts of the Tikkun community. I want to be part of it. And you're taking the initiative for a pro-Israeli and pro-Palestine peace movement is the best that has ever occurred in the entire history of negotiations, and I hope that it will spill over to India and Pakistan, and it will spill over. It will spill over everywhere as we gain momentum and reach critical mass of consciousness in the world that says, let's really focus on the real issues. When there are 40,000 children dying every day of hunger and related problems, our media is focused on the shoplifting habits of Winona Ryder. When the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are responsible for 95% of the arms trade in the world, when that trade thrives on the perpetuation of conflict, when India and Pakistan were at the height of their hostilities, Mr. Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, was peddling arms to both countries, while at the same time professing that they should start a peace negotiation. There's a problem. When the mission statement of our country says full spectrum dominance, refused to sign a treaty on the rights of the child, withdrawn from the anti-ballistic weapons treaty, withdrawn from the Kyoto Protocol, has criticized the landmines treaty, opposed the comprehensive test ban treaty, and is unsigning the treaty for an international criminal court. There is a crisis in our leadership and a bankruptcy in its morality when as a nation we glorify power and status, we legitimize selfishness, greed, and wastefulness as economic virtues, when our corporate institutions and governments want to teach the world to behave just like us. Open markets and globalization have become euphemisms for a culture that is rapaciously consumption-oriented, threatens sustainability, and increases conflict in the world. We talk about peace with such self-righteous morality. At the same time, we are right now engaged in activities that threaten not only our own survival, but the survival of our planet. I was talking to an anthropologist friend of mine recently, and he said something very interesting. He said if insects disappeared from this planet, in 5 years, all life on this planet would cease. But if human beings disappeared from this planet, in 5 years, life would flourish again on this planet. So, nature might just be saying, this human being, it was an interesting experiment. It didn't really work. So, let's not waste any more time. We are the only species that goes to war on a regular basis in the name of God. We are the only species that has caused the extinction of other species and threatens our own. We are the only species that has desecrated and devastated our mother, Earth. And at this moment, we are risking our own extinction and the survival of this planet. And so we really are at a crossroads. Why communities like Tikkun are so important is that this is the moment of choice. This is the moment where we could make a choice and take the next leap in our evolution. Because despite our terrible past, despite all the things we've done to ourselves and to our brothers and sisters and to all the other species on this planet, we are the only species that is self-conscious, the only species that is aware of awareness, conscious of its own consciousness, the only species that asks ourselves, where did we come from? What are we doing here? Is there meaning or purpose to our existence? Do we have a soul? What happens to us after we die? Does God exist? And if she does she care about us? And one of the things any scientist will tell you is that once you have questions, there are also answers. But you first have to ask the questions. And the fact that our nervous system is hardwired to ask these questions means that it is also hardwired to know the answers. Not only to seek the answers, but to know the answers. And yes, our past is one of tribalism, our past is one of racism and hatred and bigotry and prejudice. It is true. Look at history and you will see that never has humanity had a great era of peace and harmony and love and compassion on all the ideals that we talk about. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be changed, because we are in a very critical moment where for the first time we have the resources, we have the technology, we have the understanding, we have the science, we have the technology to radically change our worldview, and by radically changing our worldview, for the first time, repair and mend and heal ourselves. We have the ability. At this moment, we need to awaken the neural networks of the planetary mind. The neurons are already there. We just have to reinforce the synaptic connections. So the awakening of the planetary mind will cause a phase transition, a quantum leap of creativity that will make every other model that we have had for reality totally obsolete. Something very interesting has been happening in science in the last 100 years, and that very fundamental shift in our scientific worldview has not yet reached critical mass. If it had, then we wouldn't be seeing the conflicts that we are seeing today. About 100 years ago, brilliant minds in Europe and elsewhere, and also some in the United States, came to a set of ideas that can be phrased only in one sentence, and that is, if we truly understood these ideas, we would witness immediately the climactic overthrow of the superstition of materialism. Today, the very fact that you can use a cell phone, that you can surf the information highway on the internet, all these technologies are based on a very fundamental premise in science. And that fundamental premise in science is that the essential nature of the material world is that it's not material. That fundamental premise in science is that the essential nature of the physical world that we live in is that it's not physical. That fundamental premise in science is that the essential stuff of the universe is non-stuff. And as we look into this non-stuff, we witness our own selves. Today's understanding of the quantum nature of the universe tells us that if we go beyond the world of matter and energy and information and space-time, we enter a singularity, a realm of existence where everything is inseparably one, where there are no objects, where there is no information, where there is no energy, but there is infinite intelligence, where there is a single intelligence that is differentiating into all the seers, all the biological organisms that do the seeing, and all the scenery. It's a fundamental fact of today's science that we interdependently co-arise from a common single source of intelligence. Call it God, call it spirit, call it the universal consciousness. But if you go beyond the differences, which aren't even differences, because our bodies are recycled earth, our breath is recycled air, our emotions are recycled energy, our thoughts are recycled information, our personalities are recycled relationships, and our souls are reflections of every other soul. That today is a fundamental fact of science, of biology. Thousands of years ago, the great Buddha said, we are interbeings that inter-arise in the inter-isness. And if you understand the nature of your interbeing, you will see that it takes the whole universe to create everything that exists. If I even look at this piece of furniture, it's trees, and those trees are earth and water and sunshine and rainbows and the infinite void of the universe and the whole history of creation. And those trees are also carpenters and factories and trade unions and employers and employees and you and me, the consumer. In fact, if I want to describe this piece of furniture, I can only say one thing about it. It's a conspiracy of the entire universe. And so too, you are a conspiracy of the entire universe. And when you make a shift, the universe shifts. In physics, they say when an electron vibrates, the universe shakes. So one electron vibrating has an effect on the entire universe and the patterns of behavior of the entire universe. Today, science also tells us that at the most fundamental levels of creation, there is something called non-local correlation. This was first described by Einstein, and it came to be known as the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen equation, because if you have two subatomic particles that exchange energy and move in different directions of the universe, that for all of eternity, they remain instantly correlated with each other. If you know what this one is doing, you can predict mathematically what the other one is doing. It doesn't follow the usual laws of physics where distance decreases the strength of the correlation. It's instant. It's unmediated. There's no medium of exchange for this correlation. And it's unmitigated in that the robustness of the correlation does not diminish with space-time. In other words, there's a level of existence in the universe where everything is not only interconnected, but where everything is inseparably one, where space, time, matter, energy, information all disappear into one essence. And we can call that essence spirit. We can call that the omniscient intelligence from where we are differentiated. We can call it the unified field. You can call it Minkowski's 8-dimensional hyperspace, where the distance between two objects, no matter how far they seem to be, perceptually is always zero. Or you can call it love, where you recognize and have the experience that love is not a mere emotion, but love is the ultimate truth at the heart of creation. That the ultimate truth at the heart of creation is that you and I may be the same being in different disguises. And therefore, it is foolish for us to fight just for the disguise. You take the mask off, and as soon as you take the mask off, these different masks are nothing other than the different faces of the divine. Whether they're diabolical or they are divine, they're sacred or profane, whether they have within them forbidden lust or unconditional love, they're still masks. Today, science is saying our planet is just a little speck of dust in a relatively minor galaxy, in probably the junkyard of infinity. And it is foolish for us to fight in the name of tribal gods. It is foolish. We diminish God by reducing God to a tribal chief. God is so magnificent, Spirit is so all-encompassing, and so beyond our imagination, that our imagination reels in bewilderment, our science reels in bewilderment at the magnificence of what we are a part of. So let us get together to not only experientially but scientifically connect with each other and recognize that Christ was not a Christian, that Buddha was not a Buddhist, that Muhammad was not a Mohammedan, that Abraham was Brahman, the primordial human, that these are states of consciousness that you and I have access to, that these great seers were somehow channels for a universal truth. And that universal truth is our common heritage, irrespective of which tribe we come from, or what our ethnic background is, or how much melanin we have in our skin. We need to move as a collective humanity in this direction. And we need to engage, and this is what Tikkun is doing. Tikkun is engaging the media, it is engaging you at the grassroots level, it is engaging educational facilities, and now it is engaging in a dialogue with people all over the world, so that we have the ability today to overpower all terrorism and overpower all terrorist cells by creating peace cells that will link with each other and offer, for the first time, a critical mass of consciousness which will transform the world. That critical mass is absolutely necessary at this moment in our history. Rabbi Tikkun spoke of a culture based on Rabbi Lerner. Well, the word Tikkun means healing and mending and transformation, and he's all of that. So he's the symbolic soul of Tikkun. He's the symbolic soul of all of us who have these deepest aspirations, who want to create a new mythology that says that peace and harmony and laughter and love is possible, that says that social justice and economic parity and ecological balance and a sense for the sacred and a universal spirituality, irrespective of our origins, that they're all part of the tangled hierarchy. They interdependently co-arise, and just as a great leader comes along when only the collective consciousness is ready. And the collective consciousness manifests that leader. Likewise, the leader reinforces the deepest aspirations, the highest values, the collective dream. As when Martin Luther King says, I have a dream, that is not a personal dream, that is a collective dream. For thousands of years, we have been programmed, because of very specific biological reasons, we have been programmed to respond to situations either by fighting or by running. Planet Earth is only about 3.5 billion years in its age. The universe is about 15 billion. And in those 3.5 billion years, human beings have existed only for 200,000 years. Homo sapiens, as the human species, has been around only for 200,000 years. And only in the last 5,000 years have human beings had what is called self-awareness. For most of our history, we have been surrounded by predators, and in order to survive, we've had this biological response, which is known as the fight-flight response, which means in a threatening situation, we run or we fight. I remember when I was in medical school, the way we remember the functions of the limbic system, which is that part of our nervous system which is responsible for survival, is the 4 Fs: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and procreation. and so because of that, we are here. But now, because we've become so good at it, we have become the predator on this planet. We are the most dangerous animal on this planet. And for a few thousand years, human beings have also had something called the reactive response, which first appeared, according to anthropologists, when people started to congregate in tribes. The reactive response is manipulation and control through intimidation or confrontation or stubbornness or withdrawal or playing the victim or being extremely nice but manipulative nevertheless. In the history of Vedanta, they say there are only 4 kinds of people: the nice, the nasty, the indifferent, and poor me. And they're all control dramas. They're all control dramas. But something very interesting happened to us in our evolutionary history about 4,000 years ago, when for the first time a few luminaries across the world, and this is called the age of the axial sages, the prophets of the Old Testament, the great Greek philosophers like Parmenides and Socrates and Plato, the sages of the Upanishads, the Eastern seers like Lao Tzu and Confucius and Buddha and many others, developed the ability to get in touch with a domain of awareness that is beyond the physical, a domain of awareness which is non-local and transcends everything that we can perceive with our senses. The great English poet William Blake, in one of his poems, says, "We are led to believe a lie when we see with and not through the eye that was born in a night to perish in a night while the soul slept in beams of light." So right now, as you're listening to me, I want you to try this. As you're listening to me, just turn your attention for a second to who's listening. So as you're listening to me, become aware of who's listening. And if you are aware right now of a presence, that presence is the presence of your soul. We can go through a whole lifetime without getting in touch with this presence. But once we get in touch with this presence, there is no going back. Because this presence is holy and sacred, and when I'm in that presence and you are in that presence, we're in the same place. And this presence is one of knowingness, is one of light, is one of love and compassion and understanding and creativity. Intention, imagination, intuition, creativity, meaning, purpose, decision-making are the attributes of this presence. And when we get in touch with it, we have recourse to what is called the intuitive response, which is a form of intelligence that is contextual and relational and holistic and nurturing and does not have a win-lose orientation and goes beyond cause-effect relationships and sees that we are part of a great chain of being where we interdependently co-create each other, where we not only share our joys but our suffering. Because what is shared suffering but compassion? When we share the suffering of other human beings, we experience compassion. And when we have compassion, there's an opportunity for love. And when there is love, there's an opportunity for healing. There is no more important task at this moment in our history, in our evolution, than to get in touch with the sacred core of our being that is common to all of us. Because there is more that we share, there is more that we hold to be true, there is more that we want together that separates each other. All human beings seek survival, seek safety, seek love, seek self-esteem, seek creative expression, seek self-actualization, seek to achieve the basic things that are the birthright of every human being. In India, Tagore once said, every child that is born is proof that God has not yet given up on human beings. Let us look at our children, whether they're Jews or Arabs or Indians or Pakistanis, and you will see that these children are the wonderment of the universe. That if we nurture them, that if we look to each other's children, we will feel that love that is so necessary for our collective healing. These children are the eyes of God. With every child that is born, God looks at himself, at herself, with fresh eyes. This morning, Rabbi Lerner and I were talking about the very fact that we can pretend that we're going to be here forever, when one of the fundamental laws of the universe is that as specific behaviors of the universe, we are here for a very short time. Buddha said this lifetime of ours is as transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain. And if we could be aware of our death, if we could be aware that the Prince of Death is stalking us, and since I looked last time, is closer, that we are all on death row, and the only uncertainty is the length of reprieve and the method of execution. If we could be aware of that, our life would be magical, because you would recognize that there are only very few things that are precious in life. And the most precious thing in life that is precious is relationship. And that relationship is what the soul is. The soul is a confluence of meanings and relationships and contexts and archetypal energies that stoke the very core and the fire of our being. I know you're going to hear some wonderful things that are going to be on a practical level, and the proposal that Michael Lerner has put together for Congress is absolutely wonderful, but that proposal will be effective only if there's a fundamental shift in our hearts. And if we can have that fundamental shift in the hearts, and if we can have alliances and we can join together and we can be living examples of that fundamental shift in the heart, then the world will transform, because the world is as we are. The world is nothing other than the projection of our soul. I'd like to end this afternoon, my session, by thanking you first of all for giving me this opportunity, by reaffirming that I'm committed to the vision that Michael Lerner has had for a long time, both theoretically and practically, as the only one that makes sense, the only one that has sanity in it, that just because we are part of a collective insanity, we should not assume that that is normal. It is the psychopathology of the average. And that even though we have interesting scientific insights, the traditions, the religious traditions of the world, the fundamentals on which they were founded, all had access to the universal truth. When I was writing my book, The Path to Love, a friend of mine sent me an English translation of an Egyptian papyrus that was discovered in the 1940s. And the original language is pre-Hebrew, Babylonian, goes back to the most ancient times of recorded history. Scholarly research indicates that whoever this author is of this particular papyrus lived in the time of Solomon, son of David. And this is what the papyrus says in the English translation. Whoever this person is, he or she is talking to God. And he says, or she says to God, "You split me and you tore my heart open and you filled me with love. You poured your spirit into mine. I knew you as I know myself. My eyes are radiant with your light. My ears delight in your music. My nostrils are filled with your fragrance. My face is covered with your dew. You have made me see all things shining. You have made me see all things new. You have granted me perfect ease, and I have become like paradise. And having become like paradise, my soul is healed." At this moment, there's a rift in our collective soul. But there's one part of our evolution that says this rift in our collective soul can be healed. And if we do that, we shall all move into that state of ecstasy, which is nothing other than exaltation of spirit. Thank you very much.